Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's session. My name is Askia, and I'm the Facilities Coordinator for the Redmond Reactor Space. Before we start, I have a few things to go over. Please take a moment to read our Code of Conduct. We seek to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. We encourage engagement in the chat, but please be mindful of your commentary, remain professional, and on topic. Useful links will be shared throughout the chat. The session is recorded and will be available on demand in 24 to 48 hours on the Microsoft Reactor YouTube channel. This brings us to today's session. It will run approximately for 1 hour, and there'll be time for questions throughout. And now I would like to turn it over to our speakers.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for the awesome intro. So I'm Mark. With me, as you can see in the Brady Bunch little call outs here, we have Krishna. Say hi, Krishna.
Hello, team.
And Noel.
Hey, good morning.
So I'm Mark. I'm a Principal PM Manager for Azure Data Factory. Krishna is Senior Program Manager, and we have Noel who's also a program. We have like all these program managers on the phone, on the call with you today, meeting, whatever it is, however you want to call it. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and thank you so much for being part of this show with us. And today's topic is going to be Azure Data Factory Change Data Capture Roadmap. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk to you a little bit about what we've been doing and investing in Data Factory in terms of Change Data Capture. What is Change Data Capture? And how do we envision that capability and feature to make life better for you as a data engineer when you are using Data Factory for data integration and for ETL? And so I'm going to walk you through the overview and roadmap for about 10 or 15 minutes, so just bear with me. And then Krishna's going to give you the real good stuff. Krishna is going to walk through a demonstration of all these different features and capabilities, including the brand new top-level resource that we've added that Noel announced on our blog just this week. And he's going to walk you through what that looks like, including a sneak peek at the less than 1 minute latency capability. I'm putting you on the spot on that one, Krishna. So let's see if we can get to that demo. Anyway, we got a lot of great stuff to share with you. We're going to go for about 45 minutes or so, I think, is what we timed it out to be. So we definitely have a lot of time for answering questions, for anything extra at the end. Or if any demos go sideways, we can always call an audible at that time. So I think with that, I'm going to jump into the slides. And and by the way, so Noel and Krishna can both answer your questions as well while I'm jabbering on, and then at the end I'll switch over and answer questions. First of all, just to kind of keep you on the same page as in terms of what we all see as Data Factory. If you're not all that familiar with Data Factory, I just want to give you a little bit of a roadmap kind of peek into an overview of Data Factory. Azure Data Factory is the data integration ETL tool within Azure. So it's cloud-based. It's a platform service, so you do not need to manage anything. You can just build your logic, build your data integration, your ETL processes as pipelines, and then we will execute those for you from the Data Factory service. Then you don't worry about it. And these are the categories that we focus on in terms of bringing to market the different features and investments within Data Factory to make it easy to use, cost-effective, powerful, intelligent. So that's a level set of Data Factory. This is not going to be a session going deep into Data Factory. This is going to focus on Change Data Capture, which I will get to in a moment. Now, when you're building your solutions in Data Factory, you are typically building an end-to-end set of analytics, and you're using Data Factory to load the lake or load your databases, to process your data, to wrangle it, transform it, get it into a shape that is usable by your business. And that is what we focus on and what we feel like we excel at within the Data Factory team. And while you're doing that, and by the way, if you want to process that data using the built-in capabilities, some of which Krishna will show you today, like the data flows to do data transformations, or if you're going to move your data around the Azure Fabric and from your premises and other clouds using the copy activity, you can also augment all that and use a code-first approach as well. You're going to see in the demos today, the Data Factory and the CDC capabilities are really no-code, low-code based, right? We make it super easy and quick for you to get to production. But if you are more of a code-first oriented data engineer, We fully support that. And you'll see that in the slide in terms of the middle section of the transform. If you prefer to process that data using, Python notebooks or SQL code, right, like we've all done for decades, that's fully supported within Data Factory too. So we support all those different personas and all those different areas around Data Factory. So what is the ADF vision? So I mentioned earlier that you're going to build pipelines to process your data. Well, little asterisk next to that. Now you could choose to make a process that is a continuously running, always running process. Pipelines are a triggered resource within Data Factory. You create a pipeline that processes, pumps your data into the locations it needs to be for your business to be able to analyze the data. But that is essentially triggered by different types of triggering mechanisms. And typically you will trigger that based on a schedule, a date, time, those sort of things. You could also have tumbling windows of times every 15 minutes, every 5 minutes. You can have event-based triggers. But now with the CDC resource that Christian's going to show you, you don't need to make a pipeline. You don't even need to design a graph at all. See, our UI that you're going to see is really based on designing graphs of activities and transformations. But now you can simply just configure a process. And you can say, here's my source data. I want it to go here, and I want some, transformation on the way as the data goes from left to right. And then you're going to click start, and it's going to start processing your data. Really, really exciting, really cool. But for the overall pipeline piece of Data Factory, the bread and butter, the core steak and potatoes of Data Factory, these are the things that you're going to do with it. You're going to transform your data. You're going to create triggers. You're going to make pipelines. Let me talk a little bit about those other high-level resources that we're going to skip today in the demo. One of them is the very powerful scale-out, auto scale-out. By the way, you don't need to learn anything about Spark, but then we will still execute your code on Spark using data transformations. We call this as a data flow. And actually, Christian's going to show you this. So the data flow piece of Data Factory fully supports change data capture. Change data capture will let you take these pipelines in these data flows and process your data in a way that is just super effective. Every time you run this, Data Factory will maintain the high watermark, the checkpoint for you. And you can even leverage the native CDC capability of data stores like SQL Server and Cosmos DB. More on that in a minute. The slide is not coming through StreamYard very well here, but this section is essentially talking about the fact that you can transform that code, you can transform that data code-free. And let me actually just go back a second to the previous slide, because I just realized I completely forgot to talk about the whole pipeline piece. So the key thing that all of this rides on, that Spark transformation, it rides on pipelines. Pipelines are the key element within Data Factory that allow you to orchestrate different things. So when you're building your workflow and you are building your data pipeline, Data Factory has a set of services in the back end that allow you to do all that without managing any of it. You just define what you want to do in steps. And these steps you see on the screen are called as activities. So the pipeline piece is actually one we're not probably going to talk too much about today, because instead we're going to talk about how to process the data through a CDC process. Some other ways that you can transform and process and wrangle your data and Data Factory would be through the Power Query interface. And this is what we typically call as data wrangling at scale. So you can actually add a Power Query activity into your pipeline too. This is a bit orthogonal to our discussion today, so I just want to mention it as something that you can do. And then really cool is the fact that all of this is given to you in a platform that allows you to monitor and manage all this. So the monitoring piece, we will talk in demos today about. So you'll see a new orientation for monitoring for the CDC processes, because the change data capture is based solely on data arriving and processing, and then putting that data into your target data stores. The monitor that you see on the screen in this slide is the current orientation, or the previous orientation of Data Factory monitoring, which was purely based on your data flows, your data transformation. That's the bottom right picture. And the top right-hand picture is for your pipeline monitoring. Pipeline monitoring is based on monitoring workflows. So think of it as a business process automation, and you are monitoring that. So you will look to see, did this activity succeed? Did this fail? What happened? How long did it take? the monitoring you're going to see today is really cool. It's all based on data as it arrives and how much data arrived each time the data was discovered. Oops. This slide is not at all showing properly in StreamYard, so I'm going to just talk to it. But what we could probably do is I think we might have a way to share the slides, and even if we can't share it here through the StreamYard, through the reactor session we have today, Noel and I can make sure that we get these slides to you through Twitter or our social media, because it has a nice picture on it. Now, the native CDC capability that's been built into Data Factory is available to you in a couple of different orientations, and Christian's going to show those to you. The first is through data flows. So when you make a pipeline and you add a data flow to it, you can, the pictures really kind of get this point across real nice, but they don't show, which is that it's super simple and easy. That if you remember the earlier slide I showed you where in the PM team, Krishna, myself, Noel, we focus so much on making your job super easy. What we did to enable change data capture is we simply, thank you for that, Skio. We simply give you a checkbox on the source to set. So you check a box and you say, I only want changes. Boom, that enacts an entire set of features behind the scenes of the Data Factory that maintains a checkpoint every time you run it. So you don't need to worry about watermarks. You don't need to store it in a file or in a database table or anything like that. We manage that for you. Then the next time when you run that pipeline, that data flow, only the last set of things that change will be discovered. Now, you can do this for sources that are either natively supporting CDC, like SQL Server, Azure SQL Database, SQL Managed Instance, Cosmos DB. I might be forgetting a few. Others that have the ability to have a numeric increasing value as a column or date time. So we extend beyond the capability of those sources to support native CDC to give you even more rich capabilities in CDC. So that's just words. I think when you see the demo, you're going to be just wowed by what it does. Now, another part of being able to get data in very quickly and effectively is replication. And we have support for this built into Synapse. So we're talking, this may seem a little weird, but we're talking about Data Factory, Azure Data Factory. If you are an Azure Synapse Analytics user, you will see most of these capabilities surface to you already inside of your single pane of glass in the Synapse workspace, known as Synapse Pipelines and Data Flows. So the initial feature that allows you to do discovery of data as it changes through replication is known as Synapse Link. And this one in particular is talking about Synapse Link for SQL that is built into Synapse Analytics, and it is a service that we built in the Azure Data Factory team for Synapse. We took a lot of the tech that we did for Synapse Link and another tool within Synapse is known as the Data Mapper. We took those two technologies. The Data Mapper, by the way, is another ETL tool that the Data Factory team that we designed and built for Synapse that allows you to load database tables primarily around the database templates feature of Synapse. And we took that Data Mapper UI orientation and we took the Synapse Link and we kind of melded these things together into a really super cool new capability in CDC. So I just want to make sure that you're aware of that. Then another thing to be aware of that we're not going to be able to demo today, we're not going to be able to demo Synapse Link or this one, which is SAP and SAP CDC. So we also brought CDC to SAP, which was just an enormous breakthrough for Data Factory. And SAP, if you are managing an SAP environments, or what they call landscape, I think is what they call it as. No, wait, I might be confusing that something else. Anyway, let's just call it a landscape because I like that term. If you're managing that within your organization, you know that's a very complex set of technologies. We made it super simple to be able to capture just the changes from all those different things like ECC, BW, HANA, and be able to make a data flow that can bring that data in only as data changes. So you can see that we invest very heavily in CDC across the investments that we've made within a Data Factory. Okay, so thanks for being with me. I am almost at the end of the slides. Hopefully I did not completely smother you with slides, but we're going to get ready to do some demos. And I believe this is my kicking off point. Awesome. So let me talk a little bit about what you're going to see. So first, Christian's going to show you some of the previous slides in demo form of CDC inside of pipelines and data flows. What you're then going to see is the newest innovation that we announced this week, which is the change data capture resource. This allows you to use that mapping tool that I talked about to easily and quickly define, without writing any pipelines or graphs or data flows, be able to define a change data capture process. So the steps that you do are essentially outlined here, right? You're going to pick your sources, and then you're going to say, do I want to directly map that into a location, a destination? And optionally, you can set transformations, but you don't need to learn data flows to do that. What we found in talking to you all and talking to the community and customers and users is that sometimes, the things we introduce to Data Factory are powerful and useful, but they can be intimidating because you have to learn a new skill. You have to exercise a new muscle that you're not used to. Well, we now can bring that power of the change data capture capability and data transformation without you needing to learn pipeline constructs or data flow constructs. You're going to see that there's drop downs. I'm sure Krishna will show it to you. There's drop downs that you can say, trim this data, lower it, uppercase it. Real simple. Lastly, then you're going to, after you've mapped it, the real cool thing is you just say, how often do you want to pick up those changes? So you're going to set a latency. And then this is what's going to be like, it's going to blow your mind if you're used to Data Factory. You're going to click a start button. You're not going to make a schedule. You're not going to have to say every Thursday at 2 p.m. or every 5 minutes do this. Actually 5 minutes you would say. Just say set a latency. And you'll see that one of the options that we are lighting up that is brand new, that is still under private preview. You won't be able to see this yet in your factory, but one of the options that you're going to see is the ability to say just always keep looking for changes. Sub 1 minute latency. The pictures at the bottom are just typically, what I show when I'm not able to do a demo, but I'm not going to talk about those because you're going to see the live demo. And I think I'm about done with my discussion. So thanks again for listening in and for joining us today. I'm going to hand over now to Krishna, who's going to walk through demos of some of the stuff. And Krishna, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mark. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Great. I hope you guys can see my screen right now. I'm inside the data flow pane. Can you guys see my screen?
I think you're good now.
Said we had planned 2 different demos for you guys today. The first one that we had planned was the native change data capture in the mapping data flow. The second one that we have planned to show you today is the new CDC mapper tool. And the one that I'm going to show you is something that we've still not released, which is more to do with the continuous run, which runs in less than 1 minute frequency. I'm more excited to show this to you guys. So let me go ahead and start with the native change data capture and mapping data flows. So what you see on the screen is the data flows, of course. And for demoing the native CDC, I try to keep it minimal. Just use a single source and a sink. So when you actually go ahead and want to use a native CDC, all that you need to do is pull in the source. And in the source, for this demo, what I'm going to use is I'm using a Azure SQL DB source, which supports native SQL CDC. There are a list of supported source connectors, which supports the native CDC. For now, I'm picking up the Azure SQL DB. In the Azure SQL DB, in the source, I'm just pointing this back to an Azure SQL DB link service that I had created. For this demo, again, I'm kind of like using one of the sample databases that is available with Azure SQL DB, namely the AdventureWorks LT database. And I'm going to consume one of the tables in here, which is the customer table. So in the source, all that I'm doing is just going ahead and pointing it back to the link service that points to the same Azure SQL DB AdventureWorks customer table. And in the source options, when you come to the source options for the source, you get to see a new option back in here, or rather, I would say the change data option that we have. So once you go ahead and give this a check, you have two different types of way in which you can capture the changes from the source. One, which is called the incremental column, and the other one is called the SQL native CDC. So the incremental column has been around with ADF for quite a long time now. It is based out of the watermark column, which could be of a timestamp or a ID column, and it expects the rows to the values to increase monotonically for it to capture those changes. The other one is the SQL CDC for which I'll be doing the demo now. So let me go ahead and choose the SQL CDC in here. And once I choose this, I get an option to select my run mode. The run mode pretty much is very straightforward. It's just letting us know whether, for the first run, whether you want the full load to happen, whether you want to pull in the existing load inside and then subsequent run start the incremental, or directly just start with the incremental changes. So for now, for this demo, I'm thinking I'll just go with the full on first mode, full on the first run, and then incremental. So I'm choosing that option in here. Once I have said this, I can go back to the data preview, click the refresh to see how the data will look like at the source. For now, since we would want to show you another demo, I'm just keeping this simple. The source is now followed by a delta sync. So for this demo, again, like I said, I want to use Azure SQL DB as source and a delta lakehouse as the sync. So I've just connected this back to a sync which points to the delta lake. I have already pre-configured the link service for the same. And in the settings, I'm going ahead and I'm selecting the folder where I would like to hydrate and land the data to. So for now, I'm going to just say AW, which is AdventureWorks MDF CDC. And since I'm using the customer table, I'm going ahead and selecting that here. Click OK. So once I do this, I do have few settings. I was thinking I'll probably cover this while we wait for the execution to get completed. So we'll come back to this in a bit. For now, I'm pretty much done with setting up a CDC for my customer AdventureWorks customer table. So I'm going to pull in the changes from the SQL DB source and then push this back to the Delta sync. The next thing that I need to do, what you're looking at is actually a data flow. We would need to put this data flow inside a pipeline. So I've already defined a pipeline. And in the pipeline, I'm just going to pull down a data flow activity and then point this back to the data flow that we've just created. So that's exactly what is being done here. And there's something called a checkpoint key. Probably we'll cover this while we execute the data flow, the pipeline as well for this run. And once I've done all these changes, of course, I would need to just go ahead and publish this. Since I've just made some changes to the data flow, I'm going ahead and publishing those changes back in here. Okay. Okay, so once the publish has been completed, all that I need to do is just go ahead and run this pipeline for us to initiate the CDC data flow. So that's what we need to do. The important part that I wanted to cover again is before we do all of this, of course, we would need to go ahead and set up the CDC at the database. So I've just brought in the SQL Server Management Studio and I've connected to my source Azure SQL DB in here. Here, of course, we do have the documentations around how to enable CDC on the SQL Server side. So the first thing, of course, you do is go ahead and enable the CDC at the database level, and then follow it up with enabling the CDC at the table, the customer table side of it. Once this is done, of course, I can just go ahead and execute a query to check if my customer table is being tracked for CDC, and it is. So this is what we have. So since I'm going to go ahead and execute the pipeline, before I do that, I wanted to just go ahead and show you guys the number of tables that we have for the customer table in AdventureWorks. So I'll go ahead and execute that really quick. So for the initial run, of course, what we have is around 847 rows, which is available in the customer table. I'm just going ahead and executing the select star as well. So we do have around 847 rows in here. Now, I'm just going back to our CDC again. Since we've already built the CDC up and we've put that, in the data flow, and then we call that data flow inside a pipeline, we can go ahead and execute this. I'm going to use the debug session itself to execute this pipeline for now. So I've just hit the debug button to kickstart the execution. While this is running, I was thinking probably, I could probably just show you what are the supported data types for the native CDC. So at present, what we support is SAP CDC, Azure SQL DB. That's something that I'm using for the demo. And then we've got the SQL Server, and then Azure SQL MI, and then the Azure Cosmos DB. These are the data sources which supports native CDC at present. So we're going to use that. Then, yeah, probably just going back to the sync side of it. This was my initial data flow that we had created. So just coming back here, I just wanted to show you the settings part of it, where we do have an option to kind of like allow insert, delete, or upsert or update to actually go through the sync or not. So you do have these settings where you have the flexibility to choose what kind of changes you would want to see at your target. So for now, I've selected everything, and based on that, you may want to give the key column as well. For this customer table, we've got customer ID as the key column. So that's exactly what I've done here. Let's quickly go back to our pipeline just to get a view of where we are for this execution. Okay, so I see that it's still running. So let's just give it a minute or two for the initial run. Of course, we are pulling some data back in there. So I'll just give it some time to get completed. Mark, is there something that you'd want to cover during this time, or something that you may want to cover while we wait for this particular pipeline execution to get completed?
I'd like to. I am back. There we go. There I am. Hey, Krishna. Yeah, thanks for bringing me in there. Yeah. So a couple of things I wanted to say. And by the way, while this is running in the background, we could always move over into beginning to go through a mapper as well. So there's a couple of ways that we could show this. I did want to say that the different elements of Data Factory that I was mentioning through the presentation to set this up are actually being showed. I guess I kind of ignored a little bit the fact that the pipeline aspect to this is there when you're making data flows, because a data flow doesn't run sort of on its own. You need to have a pipeline there to be able to execute it. Looks like your process.
That's right. Done. That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then just if you want to show the monitoring on this too, it'd be awesome. Yeah.
Sure thing. Okay. So let me just go ahead and show you guys that we initially had around 847 rows, and we've got those 847 rows being flushed back to the sink for the first run. And while I go ahead and show the other things, I'll quickly go ahead and introduce some changes back to the source table. Again, even before I do that, I wanted to just quickly cover something. So yes, now that we know the 847 rows have been pushed back to the Delta Sync lakehouse, I've just got a little helper data flow in here to just visualize the Parquet file. So since we've chosen Delta as a format, it's going to be a snappy compressed Parquet files, which is not going to be readable. So I've just got this in here, a simple data flow which actually goes ahead and connects to the same target delta where the data lands, and through the data preview we can go ahead and kind of like understand what's the number of rows that have been pushed to the sink. So I'm just clicking the fetch data in here.
So just as a note, I wonder if you click hide on that little bar that's up there from StreamYard, if that would just kind of get that out of everybody's way. Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Yep. So let me just refresh this really quick again. There you go. So you see those 847 rows from the source is being pushed back to the destination. Now, while we go ahead and show the other things, I thought I'll probably get the next run started. So I've already introduced a few changes in terms of inserts. I've inserted 3 different rows into the source. Now let me go ahead and start the debug again. Yeah, Mark, over to you. So while this
What I was
gets
thinking was might be interesting to show, because we talked about this as one of our value props earlier in the slides, is if you can go over to your monitoring view on the left-hand side and then go to the debug section under pipeline runs. You're running these all from debug, right?
Yeah.
The debug under pipeline runs, it's over to the right a little bit.
Sorry. Yeah.
There you go. Which was the one you just ran? Was it?
I believe it should be this one. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, click on the eyeglasses at the bottom. I just want to show. I just got to hover over that run. Yeah, click on the eyeglasses over to the left. Go over to your left. Yeah, there you go. Just perfect. So one of the really cool things that we're able to show. So if you click on the stages icon there at the bottom, you'll get detail within Data Factory. This is all just automatically what you get as you build your CDC processes, you build your pipelines, your data flows. We give you deep introspection of what happened. This will tell you how long it took. Now, Christian doesn't have any transformations in his data flow, which is an interesting thing to think about, right? In that if you're just moving data through CDC, you just want to capture changes, you just make a data flow without needing to learn. Don't feel overwhelmed by needing to learn the 200 different functions we have in transformation library. You don't need to know those. But even with this case, with just the source and sink, you get the time it took and number of rows. There'll also be details in terms of number of columns that were transformed and all that. I think that might be, if you click on the transformations, you might get those. If you click out of this and then click on the transformation itself, like the sink node at the top of your graph there. So you see the number of partitions, skewness, kurtosis, more information than you ever wanted to have is completely just computed for you by the Data Factory process. And this happens not just for data flows, but for copy activities, for lookups, get metadata, all the different things you do within Data Factory. I just want to point this out. So thanks for the side tour there, Krishna.
Thanks, Mark. Yep. So yeah, I believe what I'm expecting to see is actually those 3 rows. Just trying to go back in here and do a select star again, just to validate that we have those. Okay. Looks like those inserts never ran. My bad. So let me just go ahead and execute them again.
You show that it doesn't pick up all the data every time it runs, which is important. So that's actually part of the demo.
Thanks. That yeah. So I've just executed now, and I do see 850 rows. My bad. So let me go back in here and rerun.
Yep. Perfect. So with that, it's an interesting kind of, like, it wasn't intentional, but it does show that the nice thing is, if you schedule this every 15 minutes, every hour, whatever it is, you don't waste time processing. It's going to save you time. Your SLA is going to be better, and the cost you pay for Data Factory will be better, because we are a utilization-based cost mechanism within Data Factory. So the more data you process, the more that you pay. And so the nice thing is that you don't have to reprocess all those rows and do like hashing. We had customers that were doing some really clever things, but that would be an expensive way to do it, would be to look at your source and your sink and then hash those rows and looking for changes. In this case, then, because this will automatically only pick up the changes, it'll run without any processing time and no cost associated with 0 rows at that point, right? And just a question for you, Krishna. After this is when you were going to go into the new CDC mapper, is that right?
That's right. I've got the CDC mapper ready as well. So once we complete this, I'll just go back in there to show
Got it.
the change data capture.
While this is running,
Or-
let me do this. Unless you want to show anything in particular, I was going to just quick show. Oh, my video is like way behind. Is my voice way behind too? That looks wild. Oh, I know why. Because I'm looking at YouTube. I went over to YouTube to look, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like 10 seconds delayed. Let me just see if there's any questions on here that I can answer. Actually, I can see the questions on StreamYard. So give me a sec. I'll let your process run while I answer some questions. CI/CD tools. We enable any GitHub and ADO, Azure DevOps, the CI/CD tools you can use. How do you debug transforms if there are problems? So the transforms that, if Krishna were to add transforms in between these two, can you do me a favor, Krishna? Can you actually, it's done. So let me.
I
Oh,
this
look at
just got
that!
completed, so yeah.
The question popped up right in front of the screen. Awesome. Okay,
Right. So
go for it.
we did introduce 3 different inserts back in there, so you can see those changes being captured and displayed back in here as 3 rows being written. Now I can go back in here to the helper data flow that I had, and then try to refresh this data preview again.
And this is a look at your Parquet data that you landed, right?
That's right. That's right. On this thing. Yep.
Do me a favor while you're just waiting for that, can you click on the plus sign next to your View Parquet node in your graph? I just want to show there were some questions for the folks who aren't that familiar with data flows. If you pull down the menu for all of the, go back to your graph at the top of your screen. Just click on the plus sign in between View Parquet and Sync 1. I want to show everybody what the transformations are. You know how to get to the toolbar for data transformation?
Oh, okay. You're talking about the transformations in here.
There you go. Yes, thank you. Yes.
Sorry.
So this is the way you add transformations. So when you add these and then you look at the graph that Krishna was showing, you'll see detail of each thing. So if you're deriving columns, if you're pivoting, if you are aggregating, you will see how long it took to aggregate. You'll see how many partitions were created for the aggregation and all that. So to Harry's question on the chat, I just wanted to point that out.
Great,
okay, back to your regularly scheduled program, Krishna.
Sure, great. So we are back here, and you can see initially we had around 847 rows, and we introduced 3 rows, and those 3 changes have been picked up right now, and we have it back in here in the destination. So this Parquet, this view Parquet is actually connecting to the Delta Sync, and it's able to, kind of like pick the total number of rows and let us know that, hey, we do have those changes that is propagated to the sync. So that's something that's it. I had for the native CDC demo. Is there anything, Mark, before we jump on to the change data capture?
No,
as a result?
the really cool thing that Christian's going to show you now is, so we made this really simple, right? All he had to do was just kind of set a checkbox in the source to say, only give me changes. Boom, Data Factory goes into action, takes care of the rest for you. Now, what's really cool is to make this even simpler now, what he's going to show you is what we did for the brand new CDC resource that we just released this week. And the one question that Harry was asking, so Harry also asked about Azure Functions. Yes, if you would prefer to transform your data with functions, in the pipeline, you will see an activity for Azure Functions, and you can point to your Azure function to do that there. Okay, good for the CDC mapper, Krishna.
Okay, great. So I'm super excited to demo this change data capture, which we call as a data mapper as well, a CDC mapper. Our engineering team is currently working on specific part of this, which I'm going to demo to you folks today. So let me just start with creating a new change data capture. As you can see, and as Mark was mentioning, we have the change data capture now as a top level resource artifact within EDF. So all that you need to do is just, kind of like click on here and say new data mapping or new mapping. So once you do that, we bring in the blade where you just give this a name. So let's call it AdventureWorks CDC Mapper. Yep, I think I don't have anything with that name, so I'm good with that. And then all that you need to do is just go ahead and choose your source. So I'm planning to use pretty much the same source so that you guys can actually see the difference that the CDC data mapper brings in. So I'm gonna go back to the Azure SQL database again and point this to the same AdventureWorks LT sample database where I have already enabled the CDC. So I'm just going back in there and I believe I've got this in a different server though. So just not to confuse people, I've just got another SQL server where I have enabled, I have the AdventureWorks LT database already created, and the customer and the CDC enabled for the database, and a couple of tables in here. Namely, I'm going to enable the CDC for three different tables, or rather two different tables. The customer table, the product table, and the address table. We can actually use all the three. So I've enabled it for all the three here. So just going back to the CDC mapper, I've already configured the link service for this, which connects back to this AdventureWorks database. So selecting that link service in here. Once I do select the link service, what's going to happen is it's going to connect back to the source database and provide me the list of tables. Uh, as you can see, these are the list of tables which could be used for CDC. So as you can see, the first three tables over here, for which I've enabled the CDC at the SQL Server side. Those are being mentioned as SQL Server CDC. The rest of the tables, the entities, could still be used for CDC. We could pretty much use it for incremental watermark column based CDC. So all that I need to do is I need to just have a incremental date or timestamp column back in here, and I should be able to pull in the changes that goes through the particular table. So for now, I'm going to restrict myself to these three tables. So all I need to do is just go ahead and select these three different tables where the native CDC has been enabled at the target. I have an option to preview my source. I can just go ahead and click preview, data preview in here, which will kind of like pull in the initial few records at my source, just to give me a glimpse of how the data is at the source right now. And once I've completed with choosing the tables, all I need to do is just hit the continue button in here. And in the next window, I just need to go ahead and specify the target where I would want to land those changes. So again, I'll use a different Delta Lakehouse in here. I already have a link service configured for this, so I'm choosing that. Choosing the folder where I would want to land this. So, okay. There you go. Okay. So I've actually chosen three different folders where I would want to land these incoming changes. So I can go back and, kind of like add more targets or delete the existing one. I can play around with this quite a bit. Just going and hitting the continue button in here, and my mapping is ready. So as you can see, the source table is automatically mapped directly to the target table. While this is happening, you could also see that, under the columns map, we are trying to load the schema. And sometime you're going to start seeing the auto mapped column coming up. So we pretty much use the fuzzy matching and map the columns between the source and the target table. So while that happens, I would probably just come back to the source and target
Krishna,
side as well. Yeah.
I just want to jump in real quick with one thing that's really, really important. What Krishna just said, auto mapping, right? So these schemas that are present in the source are being discovered, and they are being mapped to his right hand side, which he chose to be Delta. He's not doing any manual mapping at all. The columns, when you pick right hand side, will be matched using, like you mentioned, fuzzy logic to do that. So it's going to be like lookups. Now, if you don't like the matching that came with it, you click on the column mapping button. I don't want to throw you off your demo. It might be showing that, but the column mapping will allow you to change those if you didn't like it. But the nice thing is, in most cases, you don't even need to do this at all. It's done for you.
Right. So now we can see that the column mapping is already done for us. It's auto mapped. So if we need to go ahead and make any changes back in here, of course, like Mark said, we can always go back to the column mapping page. And in this column mapping page, as you can all see, we do have these columns that is being mapped from the source to the target. By default, the mapping method that we use is the direct mapping. And this is the place where we can go ahead and add few transformations. Mark was mentioning that in the initially during his slides, in his slides. So I can go ahead and use different types of transformations that are available back in here. Currently, we have these derived column transformations and aggregates available. So we could go ahead and use them as well before we kind of land the data on the target. So interestingly, if I would want to pull in those deletes happening, I need to come back in here and choose the primary key. So for this customer table, the customer ID acts as the primary key. So let me just go ahead and do that before I move on to anything else. And then, like I said, we can always come back in here and apply a few transformations. For instance, if I would want the email addresses to be in lowercase, I'm just going ahead and say lower, and probably suffix if I would want to go ahead, or rather before I do that, let me just go ahead and do it. So I would just directly go back in here. I can choose the advanced transformation back in here, which gives me the flexibility to go ahead and use the expression builder. So I can click on the expression builder and then choose any of those expressions, the functions available. So for now, I'm going to use the if null function just to see if the values for the suffix column comes as null. I can probably, substitute that with not available. So I'm just going to call this NA. And then click save and finish once you're done. So you can pretty much play around. You can add new mappings as well. You can reset the mapping that has been mapped by default. There's a lot of cool features, cool stuff that you can do back in here. And once you are kind of like set, you can come back in here and hit the data preview refresh button. So when you do this data preview refresh button, what we are trying to show you is how the data would look like back at your target, the sync. So so any changes that you are trying to bring forward or propagate to your destination, to your sync, you can see them pretty much in here. So the data preview is completed now, and probably I just want to go back to the suffix. Previously, it was all null, and just added the NA back in here for the null field. So you can see those changes happening really quick. So this is about the column mapping. Let me quickly go back to the other column mappings as well, just to make sure that I set the primary key for each of those. This is the address entity. So just going back and setting the address ID as my primary key. I'll do the same for the product as well. I'm not going ahead and adding any transformations to the other two entities, just in the interest of the time. So pretty much we are done. But just a few button clicks, I'm sure you had seen how the CDC is. Just the last part of it that Mark was mentioning was around the latency part, right? So since we've set the CDC, we can come back to the set latency option in here to, kind of like set in how much of interval do you want these CDC runs to happen, so that they can pull in the changes from the source and propagate move that back to the sync. So when you look at the set latency, you can pretty much see what we have in here. The real time, which is going to connect back to the streaming sources and bring in those changes. And then right now what we have, which is coming soon, of course, as you can see it. And right now what we have is the micro batch. The micro batch and a micro batch, the one that is available right now, released is starting from 15 minutes to 2 hours. The one that I'm showing you right now, which the engineering team has been working on for the last few weeks, is around this continuous run, which is also known as the less than 1 minute run or the continuous run. So let me go ahead and check that really quick and then click the apply option in here. So I am all set. Let me go ahead and publish my resource that I just created. I'm going ahead and clicking the publish button.
There were some questions in the chat about CI/CD and Git integration. This is that Git integration, right? So if you were to have a repository set up here, every time you make a change like this, what you do is you can save it, and it creates like a sandbox branch essentially. And your branch is where you save your changes, and then you publish up to your main branch, and then you merge those in. That's the full process. In this case, this is essentially making these changes live. And I just want to point out what Krishna was showing here. So the continuous, the less than sub 1 minute latency is only in private preview yet, but I'll be coming real soon.
Right. Now we've published the resource and we're pretty much done. So all that we need to do right now is just click the start button to start our CDC execution, CDC run. So I'll go ahead and do that. I've hit the start button. I'll go back to the monitoring pane. So this was something Mark was mentioning as well. Uh, from the authoring pane, and I can click the monitor option in here to go back to the specific CDC monitoring, or of course, I can come back to the monitoring pane, the monitoring page, and you would see the change data capture here, which we've added right now. And then from here, of course, you can go back and choose the CDC that we have just created. So over here, we would go ahead and kind of like display all the stats that might be useful for you. So let me just keep the refresh on while I say that. Again, since I just started the CDC mapper right now for the continuous run, for the first run, of course, we need to start. We will be starting a pipeline underneath. The cluster would get started, so that might take a minute or two. So while I do this, I was thinking I do have another CDC that I had created just some time back. And again, while we were running the CDC, I was actually having an application that I was using to constantly pump those changes back to uh, the source table. So for this purpose, just to keep this simple, I thought I'll just use the Power Automate workflow. So I've just used the flows in here where I'm going ahead and kind of like doing the insert, updates, and deletes to the three different tables: the customer, product, and the address table that we had just seen. So this has been running constantly, and with less than 1 minute interval, it's going to keep pushing those changes back to the source tables. So with that being said, we are good. So I will just go ahead and show you how the other mapper that I had created for a similar set of tables, source and target works. So I'm back in here with the other CDC that I had created for the similar purpose. And if I just go back to the monitoring, as you can see, you do have the number of rows being read and the number of I'm sorry, the number of changes being read and the number of changes being written being displayed back in here. And in the graph section, of course, you're going to see all the different tables for which we are capturing those changes. And for each of those executions that are happening, of course, I can pull in more details around the execution stats. So once I go ahead and I click that, let me just do it for the ones where data is present. Of course, so once you go ahead and do that, you get to see the execution time when this particular CDC had run, and of course the changes that has been propagated, changes that has been moved from the source to the sink. So you see that for the customer table here, we had 2, and then products around 6 changes, and then the address table around 4 changes, and all of these changes being pushed across to the respective sinks as well. And pretty much in these graph, I see that the work is still in progress, like I said, and I see there's a a gap between both of these CDCs, but pretty much you get what I'm saying. So you can anytime just hover over this continuous execution and try to get the stats of the execution, the CDC execution that happened over time during that time. And the last part of it, of course, is going to be the diagnostics, where we are displaying the processing time for each of those entities and the number of changes that has been written separately for each of those entities. So for the customer, I've got around 254 changes and so on. It's pretty much self-explanatory, so you can pretty much see the amount of time, processing time that is taken. Yeah, let me just see if our CDC has started as well. Not that lucky.
Krishna, I think that's fine. I think we actually need to wrap up anyway.
Got it. Okay.
But I want to point out a couple of things. So take note of what Krishna showed, especially from the monitoring and from the designer for the CDC. It's always running. It's always looking for changes, and the way that you essentially there's not a trigger associated with this, right? So there's a stop button at the top of a screen, and that's when you will turn it off and you say that I'm done with this and you stop it. But otherwise, you just keep this running all the time. There was no pipeline, no graphs that had to be created, and this will just automatically keep looking for changes. So it doesn't require you to learn about triggers or schedules or anything of that nature. So once we finish up some cleanup work on the continuous piece of it, we'll open up that less than 1 minute latency. For now, you can use this tool for 15 to 2 hour latencies, and you'll get the same effect. You'll get the graph, you'll get the number of changes, and it'll continue to run until you stop it. So with that, why don't we close things up? Let's see if there's any questions left in the chat to answer. I'm going to go over, and if you have more questions, just go ahead and post them. Noel, Krishna, and I will be on for another 4 minutes. So let me go. I'll go bottom to top, I guess, so from the latest to the oldest. So Rose says SSIS said that ADF is the cloud version of SSIS. Oh, come on now. ADF is brand new, not the same as SSIS, but you can run your SSIS and ADF in the cloud. You can do. Does Microsoft have anything similar to ADF that runs entirely on-prem, like Vista? Oh, thanks for posting that on there. We don't run on-prem. We do have the self-hosted integration runtime, which is a version of our integration runtimes that you can run on-prem. That's really for connecting to on-premises sources. Otherwise, ADF is a cloud platform service. By the way, the other thing I wanted to point out is that what this does now with the CDC feature is it turns Data Factory from a batch-only tool into a batch and continuous tool. So you don't need to always run in batch now with Data Factory. And the question earlier someone had asked was about streaming sources. We will have those connectors for Event Hub and Kafka coming soon. So that real-time option, the top of that latency dialog box will light up soon, and you'll be able to connect into your Kafka and Event Hub through this as well. So we're changing the orientation of Data Factory to be more real-time. I think all these others were. I think you were on this and answering these while we were talking.
Yeah, I was doing my best. There are a lot of comments and questions, so just.
That's awesome. No, thanks everybody. Yeah, thanks everybody for the great engagement. I think with that we'll close it up. Aski, do we need to do anything more, or do you just kind of shut things down for us?
Yeah, we'll take it from here. So I will let you guys go. But we want to thank everyone for joining, and thank you to our speakers. If you have any feedback or we'd love to hear from you. So you can find a link, survey link in the chat or on the screen. And once again, thanks to our speakers. Everyone have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Great job, Krishna. Thanks.
Thanks,
everyone.
team.
Bye-bye.